The grand clock in the entrance hall of Thornfield Manor chimed 3 as Miss Sophia Brocklebank hurried along the eastern corridor, sheet music clutched to her chest. She was late for the afternoon lessons, and the Duke of Devereux was not a man who tolerated tardiness, particularly from a governess hired merely 3 months prior. "Miss Brocklebank!" The sharp voice of Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, cut through the air like a winter frost. "His Grace has requested the children practice their bark diligently this week." Lady Adelaide's performance at Lady Harrington's soirée last month was apparently quite lacking. Sophia straightened her plain grey dress, a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings of gilt frames and velvet draperies. "I assure you, Mrs. Winters, Lady Adelaide has improved considerably. 9-year-olds aren't generally known for their perfect renditions of Bach. His Grace expects perfection from all who bear the Devereux name," Mrs. Winters replied coolly. "And from those employed to elevate them." The housekeeper's footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving Sophia alone with the familiar weight of expectation pressing upon her shoulders. She had not expected to find herself governess to the children of the notoriously exacting Duke of Devereux, but circumstances had forced her hand. The daughter of a respectable clergyman, she had been well educated but left with precious little after her father's death. The position at Thornfield offered security, if not peace. Benedict, the 7th Duke of Devereux, had lost his Duchess 3 years prior. Since then, he had retreated into the rigid formality of aristocratic life, demanding excellence from his 3 children, 12-year-old Edward, 9-year-old Adelaide, and 7-year-old Charlotte, while remaining largely absent from their daily lives. Sophia entered the music room to find her pupils already seated, their faces a mixture of anticipation and dread. "Miss Brocklebank, you're late," said Edward, his chin raised in a manner that mimicked his father's imperious posture. "Yes, Master Edward, I do apologize." Sophia arranged her music at the pianoforte. "Today we shall continue with the Bach you've been practicing. Lady Adelaide, would you care to begin?" The little girl approached the instrument with trepidation, her fingers hovering over the keys like butterflies afraid to land. As she began to play, her hesitation was evident in every halting note. "Lady Adelaide, remember how we discussed bringing emotion to the music?" Sophia gently placed her hands over the child's. "Like this, feel the music rise and fall like waves upon the shore." "Father says music should be played with precision, not emotion," Edward interjected. "He says emotion leads to impropriety." Sophia bit her tongue. The Duke's coldly mathematical approach to music, as to life, had robbed the children of the joy that should accompany learning. "Precision and feeling need not be mutually exclusive," she said carefully. "The greatest musicians possess both." "Show us," Charlotte pleaded, her small face earnest. "Play for us the way you played yesterday when you thought we'd gone to bed." Heat rose in Sophia's cheeks. She had not realized her private moment at the pianoforte had been observed. After the children retired, she occasionally indulged herself with pieces she loved, Chopin nocturnes and Beethoven sonatas played with all the passion they deserved. "Perhaps another time," she demurred. "Now, Master Edward, shall we hear your progress with Mozart?" The afternoon progressed with the measured rhythm of aristocratic education. When the clock struck 5, the children were collected by their nursemaid for their evening meal, leaving Sophia alone in the fading light of the music room. She should return to her modest quarters on the 3rd floor. Instead, her fingers drifted to the keys of the magnificent Broadwood grand pianoforte, a luxury she had never known in her father's humble parsonage. She began to play softly, a Chopin nocturne that spoke of longing and lost dreams. As the music flowed through her, the constraints of her position fell away. She closed her eyes, allowing the melody to carry her to places beyond the stone walls of Thornfield. Without conscious thought, she rose from the bench, the music still playing in her mind as her body began to move in time with the phantom melody. Dancing had been her secret joy since childhood. Her father had considered it frivolous, but her mother, before consumption claimed her, had taught Sophia the steps in their small parlour when the Reverend was attending to parish duties. Now, in the empty music room of Thornfield Manor, Sophia danced alone, her movements a counterpoint to the music that lived in her memory. "What, precisely, do you think you are doing, Miss Brocklebank?" The deep, commanding voice froze Sophia mid-step. She whirled toward the doorway, her heart pounding violently against her ribs. The Duke of Devereux stood watching her, his tall figure silhouetted against the hall light. His face, with its strong, aristocratic features, betrayed nothing but cold displeasure. "Your Grace!" Sophia cursed deeply, mortification flooding her veins. "I beg your pardon. I was just cavorting about my music room like a performer at Vauxhall Gardens." His voice cut like steel. "I employed you to teach my children proper decorum and musical skill, not to indulge in such unseemly displays." Benedict Devereux moved into the room with measured steps, his impeccably tailored evening clothes and commanding presence making the spacious chamber seem suddenly small. At 35, he remained one of England's most eligible widowers, wealthy, titled, and possessed of the kind of striking looks that combined aristocratic refinement with undeniable masculine strength. "I assure you, Your Grace, this was a momentary lapse. It will not happen again." Sophia kept her eyes downcast, aware of the impropriety of meeting his gaze directly. "Indeed it shall not." The Duke circled her slowly, his assessment deliberate and thorough. "My children speak highly of your musical abilities, Miss Brocklebank. It would be unfortunate if I were forced to seek another governess." "I understand completely, Your Grace." Sophia's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "Do you?" He stopped before her, forcing her to look up at him. His eyes, a startling shade of blue that appeared almost grey in certain light, studied her with unsettling intensity. "I wonder. Tell me, where did you learn to dance in such a manner? It hardly seems the accomplishment of a clergyman's daughter." The question surprised her. "My mother taught me, Your Grace, before she passed. She believed music should be felt throughout the body." Something flickered across his features, a brief shadow of emotion quickly suppressed. A romantic notion. And entirely unsuited to the education of children who must learn discipline rather than indulgence. "With respect, Your Grace," Sophia said carefully, "your children possess remarkable musical talent. Lady Adelaide, especially, has a natural affinity for expression that could—" "Lady Adelaide will learn to play as befits her station," he interrupted. "Technical proficiency is what I require, Miss Brocklebank, not emotional displays." A long moment of silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, the Duke's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "However, as the children do seem to be progressing under your tutelage, I shall overlook this incident. Do not give me cause to question my judgment." "Thank you, Your Grace." Relief washed through her. He nodded curtly. "Good evening, Miss Brocklebank." As he turned to leave, Sophia noticed a slight unevenness in his gait, the legacy of an old riding accident, according to the household staff. It was perhaps the only imperfection in his otherwise commanding presence. After he departed, Sophia released a shaky breath, gathering her music with unsteady hands. She had nearly cost herself her position and her reputation. Yet beneath her relief lay an unsettling awareness that the Duke had watched her dance for several moments before announcing his presence, and something in his eyes had spoken of more than mere disapproval. Spring advanced into summer, and with it came an unexpected development at Thornfield. The Duke, usually absent for weeks attending to business in London or at Parliament, remained in residence. More surprising still, he had taken to observing the children's music lessons from time to time, sitting silently in the corner of the room, his presence both intimidating and disruptive to the usual rhythm of instruction. "Again, Edward," Sophia instructed gently as the boy struggled through a particularly challenging passage. "Remember to keep your wrists loose." From his position by the window, the Duke made a sound of impatience. "He's been practicing that same segment for a quarter hour, Miss Brocklebank. Perhaps it's beyond his capabilities at present." Edward's shoulders slumped visibly. Sophia felt a flare of protective indignation. "Master Edward is making excellent progress, Your Grace. Learning requires patience and persistence." The Duke raised an eyebrow at her mild rebuke. "Indeed? Then perhaps we should hear you demonstrate the proper execution, Miss Brocklebank." It was a challenge, clearly meant to unsettle her. Sophia maintained her composure as she took Edward's place at the pianoforte. She played the passage with technical precision, then again with subtle variations that highlighted the emotional contours of the piece. "You see, Master Edward," she explained, "the notes remain the same, but the feeling behind them can transform the music entirely." "Most instructive," the Duke commented dryly. "Though I wonder if such artistic liberties serve my son's education or merely your own satisfaction." Before Sophia could respond, little Charlotte piped up. "Father, Miss Brocklebank says music is like a conversation. It needs to breathe and speak and sometimes whisper." A look of surprise crossed the Duke's face. He studied his youngest child with newfound attention. "Does she indeed?" "Yes," Charlotte continued earnestly. "And when Adelaide played her piece yesterday, it sounded like butterflies dancing on flowers. Miss Brocklebank said it was because she finally stopped thinking about the notes and started feeling them instead." The Duke's gaze shifted to Sophia, who met it steadily. "An interesting philosophy of instruction, Miss Brocklebank. One that appears to be yielding results, Your Grace," she replied, emboldened by Charlotte's innocent defense. "Lady Adelaide has mastered 3 new pieces this month alone." "Has she?" He turned to his middle child. "Perhaps you would favor us with a demonstration, Adelaide." The girl glanced nervously between her father and Governess before taking her place at the instrument. She began tentatively, but as the music progressed, her confidence grew. The simple Mozart piece transformed under her small fingers, becoming something genuinely musical rather than merely correct. When she finished, silence hung in the air for a moment before the Duke spoke. "That was quite well done, Adelaide." The child's face lit with pleasure at this rare paternal approval. "Thank you, Father. Miss Brocklebank taught me to imagine I'm telling a story when I play." The Duke's eyes found Sophia's again, this time with a different quality to his scrutiny. "You have unusual methods, Miss Brocklebank, but I cannot argue with their efficacy." He rose from his chair. "Continue with the lesson. I have correspondence to attend to." As he left the room, Sophia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The encounter left her oddly exhilarated. It was the first time the Duke had acknowledged, however reluctantly, the value of her approach. The children exchanged glances of surprise and delight. "Father has never complimented my playing before," Adelaide whispered, her eyes wide. "Perhaps," Sophia suggested carefully, "your father is beginning to hear the music rather than merely the notes." The summer brought with it a house party at Thornfield. Aristocratic families from across the county arrived for a fortnight of social activities, their carriages sweeping up the long drive in an impressive procession. As governess, Sophia's role during such events was carefully circumscribed, present when needed for the children's routines, invisible otherwise. On the third evening, however, the Countess of Harrington specifically requested the children perform after dinner. Sophia found herself unexpectedly included in the gathering, standing discreetly to one side of the music room as her pupils demonstrated their progress. "Lady Adelaide has improved remarkably since spring," observed Lady Harrington to the Duke. "Such sensitivity in one so young." "She has a dedicated instructor," the Duke replied, his eyes briefly finding Sophia in her corner. "Miss Brocklebank has proven quite innovative in her teaching methods." The Countess followed his gaze. "Ah, the governess. Quite young for such responsibility, is she not? And rather pretty for a governess, if you'll forgive my saying so." Sophia pretended not to hear, though her cheeks warmed at the scrutiny. She was saved from further embarrassment by young Charlotte's enthusiastic if imperfect performance, which drew indulgent laughter from the assembled guests. After the children were escorted to bed, Sophia prepared to slip away unnoticed when the Duke's voice stopped her. "Miss Brocklebank, a moment, if you please." She turned back, conscious of curious glances from the party guests. The Duke approached, his formal evening attire emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the distinguished grey at his temples. "The children acquitted themselves admirably," he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "A credit to your instruction." "Thank you, Your Grace. They worked very diligently to prepare. I wonder if I might impose upon you for one additional demonstration." There was something unfamiliar in his expression, a quality almost like mischief, entirely at odds with his usual severity. Several guests have expressed interest in hearing the instrument played by a more accomplished hand. Sophia faltered. Surely your grace jests. It would hardly be appropriate for a governess to perform for your distinguished guests. And yet, I find myself curious to hear what moves you to dance when you believe yourself unobserved. The reference to their first confrontation was unmistakable, but rather than the censure she expected, she detected something else, a challenge, perhaps, or even a veiled compliment. I couldn't possibly, she protested weakly. Consider it an extension of your duties, he replied, already guiding her toward the pianoforte. Lady Harrington is particularly interested in contemporary compositions. Before she could formulate further objection, Sophia found herself seated at the instrument with the party guests arranged around her in expectant silence. The Duke stood to one side, his expression unreadable. Taking a steadying breath, she placed her hands on the keys. If she must perform, she would do so on her own terms. She began with Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, its haunting melody filling the room with subtle emotion. As she played, the room around her seemed to fade. She forgot the watching aristocrats, forgot her position, forgot everything but the music itself. When she finished the piece, the silence that followed was profound, then broken by enthusiastic applause. Remarkable sensitivity, declared Lady Harrington. The Duke is fortunate indeed to have secured such talent for his children. Lord Pembroke, an elderly music enthusiast, approached the instrument. Would you indulge us with something more contemporary, Miss Brocklebank? Perhaps some Chopin. With a glance at the Duke, who inclined his head in permission, Sophia began one of Chopin's more passionate nocturnes. This time, she allowed herself to play with all the emotion the piece demanded, the yearning, the sorrow, the fleeting joy. When the final notes faded, she looked up to find the Duke watching her with an intensity that sent an unexpected thrill through her body. The evening concluded with Sophia having gained a surprising degree of approval from the Duke's guests. As the party dispersed for the night, he approached her again. You've made quite an impression, Miss Brocklebank, he said quietly. Lady Harrington has already inquired whether you might be persuaded to part with your position here for one in her household. Alarm flashed through Sophia. I have no intention of leaving Thornfield, Your Grace. Unless, of course, you wish me to go. Something flickered in his eyes, relief, perhaps? That will not be necessary. The children would be quite bereft without their dancing governess. The term held no mockery now, but rather a private acknowledgement between them. Thank you for allowing me to play this evening, she said. It was unexpected. As are you, Miss Brocklebank. He hesitated, then added more softly, entirely unexpected. He bowed formally and left her standing by the pianoforte, wondering at the subtle shift in their relationship. Autumn arrived with its golden light and crisp mornings. The children's education continued with a new dimension. The Duke had begun to attend their music lessons regularly, sometimes participating in discussions about interpretation and technique. To Sophia's surprise, he possessed not only technical knowledge but a genuine, if carefully restrained, appreciation for music's emotional power. One rainy afternoon, as Edward struggled with a particularly emotive passage from Schubert, the Duke intervened. You're approaching it too mechanically, he told his son. The piece speaks of loss and remembrance. You must feel it here. He placed a hand over his heart, before you can express it through your fingers. Sophia stared at him in astonishment. It was precisely what she had been trying to convey to the boy, yet coming from his father, the instruction carried different weight. Edward nodded solemnly and tried again, this time with markedly improved expression. Well done, the Duke approved. Then, catching Sophia's surprised look, he added, I was not always so rigid in my musical views, Miss Brocklebank. Before, circumstances intervened. The unspoken reference to his wife's death hung in the air between them. For the first time, Sophia glimpsed the man beneath the ducal facade, someone who had once known joy in music and perhaps in life, before grief hardened him. After the lesson concluded, the Duke lingered, watching as Sophia gathered her teaching materials. My late wife was an accomplished musician, he said suddenly. She played with great feeling, much as you do. Sophia looked up, startled by this personal disclosure. I'm sure she was an exceptional lady, Your Grace. She was. His gaze turned distant. After her passing, I found I could no longer bear to hear music played with emotion. It reminded me too keenly of what was lost. And now? Sophia asked softly. His eyes refocused on her face. Now I find myself reconsidering many things. Before she could respond to this cryptic statement, the household butler appeared at the door. Your Grace, Lord Brampton has arrived and awaits you in the library. The moment of unusual candor was broken. The Duke straightened, his public persona reasserting itself. Thank you for your patience with Edward today, Miss Brocklebank. Good afternoon. As autumn deepened, these moments of connection between them multiplied, brief conversations about music theory after lessons, unexpected encounters in the library where they discovered shared literary interests, observations exchanged about the children's progress. Each interaction left Sophia increasingly confused about the nature of their relationship, which had evolved beyond the strict parameters of employer and employee yet remained necessarily constrained by their respective stations. Her confusion was not helped by the children's innocent remarks. Father smiles more when you're present, Charlotte observed one morning as Sophia braided her hair. He used to scarcely smile at all. I'm sure that's merely your imagination, Lady Charlotte, Sophia replied, though her heart quickened at the child's words. It isn't, Edward interjected from where he was studying by the window. Father asked me yesterday if I thought you were content at Thornfield. Sophia nearly dropped the hairbrush. And what did you tell him? Edward shrugged. I said I believed you were, though you sometimes look sad when you think no one is watching. His perceptive gaze made him seem older than his 12 years. Are you happy here, Miss Brocklebank? The question caught her unprepared. Was she happy? She had security, purpose, and growing affection for her charges. Yet beneath it all lay an unnameable yearning, a sense that her life remained incomplete. I am very fortunate to be here with you all, she answered diplomatically. Adelaide looked up from her book. That doesn't answer the question, Miss Brocklebank. Sophia smiled at the girl's perspicacity. Happiness is complex, Lady Adelaide. I am content with my position, grateful for my circumstances, and find great joy in teaching you all. Is that not a form of happiness? Perhaps, Adelaide replied thoughtfully. But I think real happiness makes people want to dance even when there's no music playing. The innocent observation struck uncomfortably close to Sophia's private thoughts. She changed the subject swiftly, directing the children's attention back to their studies, but Adelaide's words lingered in her mind. That evening, unable to sleep, Sophia made her way to the music room well after the household had retired. The room was illuminated only by moonlight streaming through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. She sat at the pianoforte and began to play softly, a melancholy Chopin nocturne that matched her unsettled mood. As the music flowed from her fingers, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she had been avoiding. She was developing feelings for the Duke that went far beyond appropriate respect for an employer. It was madness, of course. He was an aristocrat, she a governess of modest background. Whatever moments of connection they shared existed in a realm of impossibility. Lost in these thoughts, she didn't immediately register the sound of the door opening. When she looked up, the Duke stood watching her, dressed not in his usual formal attire but in a smoking jacket and evening trousers, as if he too had been unable to sleep. Sophia's fingers faltered on the keys. Your Grace! I apologize for the disturbance. I thought the hour late enough that I wouldn't disturb anyone. You didn't disturb me, he said quietly. I was already awake. He moved into the room with that slight unevenness to his stride, stopping a few feet from the pianoforte. In the moonlight, his features appeared softer, less guarded. Please, continue, he urged. That particular nocturne has always spoken to me. Hesitantly, Sophia resumed playing, acutely conscious of his presence. After a few moments, he spoke again. My wife used to play at night as well. She said the music sounded different in darkness, more honest, somehow. She was right, Sophia replied softly. Night removes pretense. There's only the musician and the music. And occasionally an insomniac duke, he added with unexpected wryness. The comment startled a laugh from her. Yes, I suppose that's a hazard of midnight performances. A comfortable silence settled between them as she continued playing. When the piece concluded, she remained seated, hands resting lightly on the keys. Why Chopin tonight? He asked. Your selection suggests melancholy. Sophia considered deflecting the question but found herself answering truthfully. I was thinking about happiness, what it means, whether one can be content without being truly happy. A weighty consideration for the midnight hour. He moved closer, leaning against the instrument. And what conclusion did you reach? That perhaps contentment is all most of us can reasonably expect, she admitted. True happiness seems reserved for stories. His gaze was contemplative. I once thought as you do. After Eleanor, my wife, died, I convinced myself that duty alone would sustain me. That raising the children according to their station and maintaining the family legacy was purpose enough. And now? Sophia echoed his earlier question back to him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Now I find myself questioning whether duty alone makes for a life worth living. He straightened suddenly, as if aware he had said too much. Forgive me. The hour makes philosophers of us all. There's nothing to forgive, she assured him. It's comforting to know that such questions trouble dukes as well as governesses. Indeed, Miss Brocklebank. Beneath the trappings of rank, we are not so different. He moved toward the door, then paused. I have observed that you no longer dance when you play. Heat rose to Sophia's cheeks. I would not risk another reprimand, Your Grace. Perhaps the reprimand was unwarranted, he said quietly. Good night, Miss Brocklebank. After he left, Sophia remained at the pianoforte, her mind replaying their conversation. Something had changed between them, something significant and potentially dangerous. She should maintain her distance, protect her heart and her position. Yet as she finally sought her bed in the early morning hours, she acknowledged that such rational considerations came too late. Her heart was already engaged, however impossible her feelings might be. The first snow of winter blanketed Thornfield's grounds in pristine white. The approach of Christmas brought with it a festive atmosphere, with holly and evergreen boughs adorning the manor's public rooms and the children's excitement growing daily. The Duke, to everyone's surprise, took a personal interest in the holiday preparations, consulting with the housekeeper on decorations and menu planning. Father says we're to have a Christmas ball this year, Adelaide informed Sophia during their morning lessons. We haven't had one since Mother died. That sounds wonderful, Sophia replied, helping Charlotte with her French pronunciation. I'm sure you'll all enjoy the festivities. Will you attend, Miss Brocklebank? Charlotte asked eagerly. Sophia smiled gently. The ball is for the family and their social equals, sweetheart. Governesses don't generally attend such functions. But Father specifically mentioned you would be there, Edward interjected. I heard him telling Mrs. Winters that arrangements should be made for you to have the evening free from duties. Confusion furrowed Sophia's brow. I'm sure you misunderstood, Master Edward. Later that day, however, the Duke himself confirmed the surprising development. He found Sophia in the library, where she was selecting reading material for the children's literature lessons. Ah, Miss Brocklebank. I've been meaning to speak with you. He closed the library door behind him, an unusual action that immediately heightened Sophia's awareness of their privacy. I understand the children have informed you about the Christmas ball. Yes, Your Grace. They're quite excited about it. As am I, he admitted. It's time Thornfield returned to some of its former traditions. He paused, then continued with careful formality. I would like you to attend, not in any professional capacity, but as a guest. Sophia nearly dropped the book she was holding. Your Grace, that would hardly be appropriate. The other guests would find it most irregular. "Let me concern myself with propriety," he replied with a dismissive gesture. "The children have expressed a strong desire for your presence, and I find I share their sentiment. Besides," he added with a hint of that rare smile, "I should like to see if you dance with partners as expressively as you dance alone." The teasing reference to their first encounter rendered Sophia momentarily speechless. When she found her voice, she could only ask, "Why?" The single word hung between them, laden with meaning beyond the immediate question. Why this invitation? Why this softening toward her? Why this gradual transformation in their relationship? The Duke moved closer, his expression growing serious. "Because, Miss Brocklebank, you have brought something back to Thornfield that I thought lost forever." "Music," she suggested softly. "Life," he corrected. "Laughter." The children smile again. "Even I find myself—" He hesitated. "Changed." Their eyes held for a long moment. Sophia felt as though they stood at the edge of something momentous and uncertain. "I have no suitable gown for such an occasion," she said finally, the practical concern a safer territory than the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "That can be arranged," he replied. "I've taken the liberty of asking Mrs. Winters to consult with you. A dressmaker from York will visit tomorrow." Before she could protest this extravagance, he raised a hand. "Please, Sophia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it silenced her objections. "Allow me this indulgence." The way he hesitated before the final word suggested he had almost chosen another, one perhaps more revealing of his intentions. "Very well, Your Grace," she conceded. "I shall attend your ball." His expression brightened visibly. "Excellent. Now, I've kept you from your task long enough. Good day, Miss Brocklebank." As he left the library, Sophia remained motionless among the books, her mind whirling with possibilities she scarcely dared contemplate. The days leading to the Christmas ball passed in a flurry of preparation. True to the Duke's word, a dressmaker arrived from York with fabrics and designs far beyond Sophia's usual modest means. Despite her protests, she found herself fitted for a gown of deep emerald silk with delicate silver embroidery, a garment more suited to a lady of quality than a governess. His Grace was most specific about the color, the dressmaker informed her with a knowing smile. "He said it should complement your eyes." The observation that the Duke had noticed the color of her eyes, and cared enough to select a fabric to enhance them, left Sophia flustered and hopeful in equal measure. On the night of the ball, Sophia hardly recognized herself in the mirror. The beautiful gown, her hair arranged in an elegant style by Adelaide's maid, loaned for the occasion, and the simple pearl earrings that had been her mother's only legacy transformed her from the plain governess to someone who might, perhaps, belong in the glittering world below. When she entered the grand ballroom, conversations faltered momentarily as curious eyes assessed this unfamiliar addition to their circle. She felt a moment of panic, certain she had made a terrible mistake in accepting the invitation. Then the Duke appeared before her, resplendent in formal evening attire, his expression warming as he took in her appearance. "Miss Brocklebank," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "How delightful that you could join us this evening." He offered his arm. "Allow me to introduce you to Lady Harrington, who has been asking after you since her last visit." With that simple gesture, he established her place at the gathering, not as a servant temporarily elevated, but as a guest under his personal protection. As he guided her through the room, making introductions with careful attention to her comfort, Sophia gradually relaxed into the extraordinary evening. "You look quite transformed," he murmured during a moment when they were relatively alone. "Though no less lovely than in your usual grey." "You flatter me unnecessarily, Your Grace," she replied, though pleasure at the compliment warmed her cheeks. "Benedict," he corrected quietly. "When we are not observed, I should like to hear my name from your lips." The intimacy of the request sent a tremor through her. "I don't think that would be wise." "Benedict." His name felt foreign yet right on her tongue, a forbidden pleasure she shouldn't indulge. He smiled, satisfaction evident in his eyes. Perhaps not wise, but certainly pleasant. The orchestra began a new piece, and he extended his hand. "Would you honor me with this dance, Sophia?" Dancing with the Duke of Devereux in full view of the county's most prominent families was beyond anything Sophia could have imagined when she first came to Thornfield. Yet here she was, moving through the patterns of a waltz with his hand at her waist, his gaze never leaving her face. "You dance as you play," he observed as they turned gracefully around the floor. "With feeling and precision in perfect balance." "I had an excellent partner in my mother," she replied. "Though I never imagined I would dance in such company." "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked, a note of uncertainty in his voice that touched her. Beneath the confident exterior, he genuinely cared for her comfort. "More than I should," she admitted honestly. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I find myself increasingly unconcerned with should and far more interested in what brings joy." The dance ended before she could respond to this revealing statement. As custom dictated, they parted, she to stand with some of the more welcoming ladies, he to fulfill his duties as host. Throughout the evening, however, his eyes sought her repeatedly across the room, each glance an unspoken communication that left her breathless with anticipation and uncertainty. Late in the evening, as the ball reached its height, Sophia slipped away to the terrace for a moment of solitude. The night air was cold but refreshing after the warmth of the crowded ballroom. Snow had begun to fall again, delicate flakes drifting down from the dark sky. She didn't hear the terrace door open, but suddenly Benedict was beside her, offering his jacket. "You'll catch a chill," he said, draping it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured, enveloped in the warmth of the garment and his lingering scent. "I just needed a moment's peace." "Had the festivities overwhelmed you?" He stood close beside her, their shoulders nearly touching as they looked out over the snow-covered gardens. "Not exactly." She searched for words to explain her tumultuous emotions. "It's more that I feel out of place. As though I've been granted a glimpse into a world where I don't belong. Perhaps it's not the world that must change, but our perception of where you belong within it." His voice was low, intimate in the darkness. Sophia turned to face him, gathering her courage. "What are we doing, Benedict? This evening, these past months, what does it signify?" He was silent for a long moment, snowflakes gathering on his dark hair. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability she had never before heard from him. "When Eleanor died, I believed a part of me died with her. I became the man you first met, cold, demanding, viewing the world through a lens of duty rather than joy." He took her hand gently. "Then you arrived at Thornfield, with your music and your dancing and your gentle insistence that feeling matters as much as precision." Her heart raced at his words and the tender way he held her hand. "The children bloomed under your care," he continued. "And I found myself waking from a long winter of the soul. You restored music to Thornfield, Sophia, not merely notes on a page, but living, breathing music that speaks to the heart." "I only taught what I believed," she whispered. "You taught me to live again," he said simply. "And in doing so, you became essential to my happiness." A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek, immediately captured by his gentle touch. "There can be no future in this," she said, though her heart cried out against the practical truth. "Society would never accept a duke's alliance with a governess." "Society," he replied with unexpected firmness, "has not dictated my choices since I came of age, and I will not allow it to do so now." His hands framed her face with exquisite tenderness. "I love you, Sophia Brocklebank. I believe I have loved you since I found you dancing alone in the music room, your spirit too vibrant to be contained by convention." The declaration left her speechless with wonder. When she found her voice, it emerged as a whisper. "I love you too. But I fear loving you will bring you only difficulty and regret. The only regret I would know is letting fear of others' opinion separate me from the woman who has restored my heart." He drew her closer. "Marry me, Sophia. Be my duchess, my children's mother, my partner in all things." Snow continued to fall around them, transforming the moment into something magical and separate from ordinary existence. In his eyes, Sophia saw unwavering certainty, a love that defied social boundaries and promised a future she had never dared imagine. "Yes," she answered, her heart overflowing. "Yes, I will marry you, Benedict." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that spoke of long restraint finally abandoned. When they parted, breathless and smiling, the world seemed transformed, not by the falling snow, but by the miracle of finding love where neither had expected it. "There will be talk," she warned, practical even in her joy. "Let them talk," he replied with a smile that held no trace of his former severity. "We shall be too busy living to listen." Hand in hand, they returned to the ballroom where Benedict immediately led Sophia to the center of the floor. As the orchestra began a waltz, he bowed formally before her, then drew her into his arms with unmistakable intimacy. A murmur rippled through the assembled guests as the Duke of Devereux and the Governess danced together, their expressions leaving little doubt about the changed nature of their relationship. Near the refreshment table, the children watched with undisguised delight. "You see," Charlotte whispered to her siblings, "I told you Miss Brocklebank would make father happy again." Edward nodded thoughtfully. "I believe they'll make each other happy." Adelaide, ever the romantic, sighed contentedly. "It's just like in the fairy stories, the handsome duke falls in love with the kind-hearted governess who teaches his children music." "And they all lived happily ever after?" Charlotte asked hopefully. As they watched their father and their beloved governess moving gracefully together across the ballroom floor, Edward smiled. "Yes, I rather think they will." The snow continued to fall outside the windows of Thornfield Manor, but inside, warmth and music had permanently returned, along with love, which, like the finest melody, had transformed grief into joy and solitude into perfect harmony.